Good afternoon, CSBG state administrators and colleagues. I'm Sharice Johnson, the Division Director for CSBG, Division of Community Assistance in the Office of Community Services. I am happy you could join us today as OCS kicks off the 2021 CSBG reporting season. I'm happy to be here today as well because we want to make sure that as we move forward in 2021, we stay aligned with you and connected with all of our state administrators so that you can know what's going on firsthand in the federal office. You have access to us to ask questions, and we have an opportunity to provide you with good guidance and direction. I have three colleagues here with me today that will be a part of this discussion. They include Monique Alcantara, Management and Program Analyst, David Berry, Branch Chief for Financial Oversight, Maxine Maloney, Branch Chief for Program Services. In addition, we have federal staff listening in on the call as we try to design ways to make sure that we are consistent in our messages to you all and just to support overall good quality continuity of information and also guidance. You will have time at the end of the session to ask questions. We have a question and answering period. You also will receive the slide deck with information that we will go over today during this presentation. And as always, you can type questions using the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. This session is being recorded, and we will use this session as a way to continue to build as we move forward in our annual reporting season. Next slide. A quick look at the agenda. Today, we plan to talk about fiscal year 2020 annual report, reporting requirements, the annual report timeline and processes, training and technical assistance that will be provided, final thoughts, and probably a few little things you weren't expecting to hear during this session. We believe today's webinar will be informative. It will provide guidance, and it also will talk about things you may be a part, you can expect over the next few months that we will do to support you in regard to the reporting season in the form of training and technical assistance and general information that we plan to send out to the network on an ongoing basis over the next few months. Next slide. Next slide. So what better way to start off this conversation than to talk about the statute that kind of guides this process. As you can see on the screen, we've referenced the public law and the section in the CSBG public law in regards to accountability and reporting requirements. This is just for your information in case we have new state administrators on the call today. We also want to make sure everyone knows that there's a nexus to everything we're doing in order to make sure we're meeting our responsibilities from a federal perspective and also in supporting states in meeting responsibilities in their role in regards to CSBG. So we thought it would be important to understand more about the statute that guides this work and why it's important for all of us to work together to make sure we're meeting those requirements. Although that's just a part of what we do in CSBG, this is kind of what we have to do in order for us to meet the obligations of this particular funding stream. Next slide. The CSBG management cycle, as you can see appearing on the screen, is really about good oversight and management, state administrators. You know, what things are you doing as you plan for this reporting cycle? I'm positive you've already started planning. I'm positive you've already started thinking about ways of implementation and reporting. I'm sure you've talked about continuous quality improvement. And so we just want to remind you that as a part of the oversight and management structure in CSBG, the state administrators hold an important role in working with their eligible entities and also in the internal state offices to plan well, to make sure you're responsive in regards to accountability, efficiency, and effectiveness of the work you do with the local entities. And also that continuous quality improvement is always a part of your thinking as we think about the families and individuals we serve. We're here to make communities stronger, individuals self-sufficient, and move them beyond their current conditions so that they can have a good quality of life. So, and that requires good planning, implementing your program as designed, and also focusing on continuous quality improvement. Next slide. The CSBG management cycle continue. What does all of that mean in regards to planning? You know, planning starts with the community needs assessment. I'm sure that across the country, your community needs assessments look different. You are finding out where communities face as an impact of COVID-19. A lot of the dynamics in communities have changed, and perhaps your needs have shifted since 2019 or early 2020. We know that organizational standards play a role in the planning cycle, and also developing continuity and accountability measures, as well as the ACSI. One example in the federal government is that the ACSI drives what we want you to experience. Today's webinar is symbolic of what we want you to experience, state administrators, in engaging with us, that we're being very proactive, we're engaging with you on an ongoing basis. So we use data and we use this planning process. Not only are we encouraging you on a state level to use it, but we're also using it on a federal level to make sure we're engaging with you and that you have a great experience with the federal office. We know that the CSBG state plan is a part of that management and oversight. What is it that each state plans to do in order to remove the conditions? And sometimes, you know, you may hear the federal officer, they may imply that we want to be perfect. But as you can see, this quote is, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence. And we know the state plan is one place where you start to have that conversation around what are we going to do? What are we actually going to implement in order to change conditions? Then we also know that the CSBG annual report tells that story through data, tells that story through narrative in regards to what difference have you made? How have we aligned our state plan with our CSBG annual report? And does it kind of work and align together to get to individual and community level outcomes? I'm sure you all know that the data that we collect also informs the CSBG congressional report or the report to Congress. Good quality data helps us to tell a better story. I'm sure that some of the reasons that we've received additional funding is because we've told a story of how community action agencies and how the states can work together with CAAs to make sure that the needs of low-income individuals are addressed on a community level. And then we have the CSBG performance management website that's forthcoming, in which we're going to continue to store data, build up our data source so that you will have access to real-time information and more information in regards to how we're doing, not only from state to state, but how we're doing as a system in regards to CSBG and how together we're meeting the needs of low-income individuals and families. So we use this slide just to say it's an ongoing process. You see it, you go from one place to the next place each year in planning, implementing, assessing, providing data, and then we use that information to tell a broader story around CSBG and the wonderful things that are going on within the network. Next slide. So I say all of that just to say that, you know, this is an important time of the year. We want to make sure you have the resources and the information to support good quality reporting and the strong development of state plans. And we hope that the information that you will hear throughout this webinar will be helpful as you think as leaders about the oversight and management responsibilities that you hold, and that it's important that we work together to make sure that we're meeting all of our requirements, we're telling a strong story about what we're doing, and that we've been very thoughtful in regards to our implementation strategies as they are impacted by the community assessment as well as our state plans. Thank you, and I'm going to transition this section over to Ms. Maxine Maloney, who will take you down the journey in regards to the annual reports for 2020. Maxine.
Thank you, Cherise. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a great week so far and that you enjoyed a long holiday weekend. As Cherise shared, I'm going to be talking about the what. So Cherise is kind of giving us the why, background on the public law that guides our actions, and the reason why we do what we do. And what I'm going to talk about is the what. And the what includes our annual report. And we have 3 reports that are coming up: the regular CSBG annual report, our CARES Act supplemental report, and a disaster supplemental report. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk about reporting requirements. But in this conversation about reporting requirements, I'm going to more so talk about the strategies. Next slide, please. So in the annual report, module 1, so I'm going to break this down by each report so that you can see a crosswalk of all the reports. So the annual report, module 1, this is about the state administration. These are the demographical information that you're sharing with us, the federal office, and these include your funding sources. And when we look at the regular CSBG, your CARES Act supplemental, and your disaster supplemental, what I'm going to share with you are some significant differences. And so your regular CSBG, this is your demographics and more of the details from the state perspective. When you're looking at the CARES Act supplemental, you're going to be reporting the same, but it's going to be an abbreviated version of module 1. And the focus is your CARES Act supplemental, including allocations to your eligible entities and state uses of the CARES Act supplemental funds and any lessons learned. Similarly, when you're reporting for the CSBG disaster supplemental, it'll be the same, again, an abbreviated model of module 1, focusing on the allocations, how you use the funds at the state level, as well as the lessons learned. And these abbreviations are to reduce the administrative burden in reporting. I want to reference what you'll note at the bottom of the slide is the Dear Colleague that outlines the requirements for reporting in our reporting strategy. Next slide, please. Let's talk about module 2. Module 2 is where a state reports local level data. This is the data on eligibility, capacity, and resources. And so you're honing in on what your eligible entities have to administer their programming. Regular CSBG will be the traditional reporting. Again, you'll note for CSBG supplemental and CSBG CARES Act supplemental, it's an abbreviated report, right? But the module will focus on the expenditures for the supplemental or the CARES Act and will be sections A and C only. Next section, please. Module 3 strategy. Again, this is the module that we're used to, and this is all about the community level transformation efforts, right? And so states are reporting from the community level, what are those transformative efforts that are happening at the local level? And I want to pause here for a second and want us to think about as state administrators and you're reporting out community level data. And so as a state administrator, you're actually rolling up this data and taking an opportunity to review, kind of clean it up, and give us at the federal level a sense of what is actually happening at the local level. So module 3 are those transformative efforts, and you're reporting normally in the CARES, in the CSBG report. When we're doing CARES or supplemental, it's actually no separate form required. A drop down is added so that you can identify any initiatives that are for both funding streams. So initiative for the CARES Act supplemental and an initiative for the disaster supplemental if you have identified an initiative. Next slide, please. Module 4. Again, this is a state's reporting on local level data. And this is about individual and family services. For the regular CSBG report, it is normal, right? And in this report, you're reporting individual family level data, your MPIs, services, demographics, characteristics of what's happening at the local level. For CARES Act supplemental and disaster supplemental, again, it's an abbreviated version to reduce the administrative burden, and you're focusing on outcome services and the people served using those individual funding streams. Again, it's really important that you focus on the individual funding streams. You have, for some states, 3 reports. Majority of states, there are 2 reports. And as we said earlier in the year, when these funds were released, it is about identifying outcomes in use separately for traditional CSBG, for CARES Act, and if your state has a CSBG supplemental, identifying those separately. So for the CARES Act, you would only be the module B only. And again, the same module B for this supplemental. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pause here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Monique Alcantara, who's going to talk about the annual report timeline and our processes. We see that there are some questions coming through in the chat box. And what we'll do is when we get to the Q&A section, we'll start first with the questions that are in the chat box, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you very much, Monique.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. As Maxine mentioned, I'm going to discuss the annual report timelines and the process of reporting the annual report cycle. So the CSBG annual report is due April 30th. This is an extension, as the normal report due date is March 31st of each year. We did extend because we know that there's more reporting to do this year with the supplemental funding. So we want to give you guys additional time to report that information. As Maxine mentioned, modules 1 through 4 will be reported as normal. Module 3 has been slightly revised to include CARES and disaster funding. And yes, I saw a question, and yes, you will be able to say that you had multiple types of funding within that one. So you could pick CARES and CSBG, or CARES and disaster, or just one or all three. For the 2 supplemental reports, they will be due May 30th of this year. It will be a simplified module 1 for both. They will be similar to what you submitted for your state plans for each supplemental. And then a simplified module 2, you will not be required to do section B, and a simplified section C. And for module 4, we're only requesting section B for both the disasters, or both of these supplemental annual reports. These are both going through OMB clearance, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this presentation as we are preparing to enter the second federal register notice. Next, I'm going to speak to the reporting process. The reporting process for the annual report is a little bit longer, and we want to talk about all these steps, starting from the smart form release, the OLDC availability, the annual report submission, then the quality assurance review, the federal review, the review memo response, and then acceptance, annual report final submission, and finalization. Today, we're really only going to focus on the first 3 parts, which is the smart form release, OLDC availability, and annual report submission. This starts our annual reporting process. We are currently working with NASCAS on the smart form release, and this is pending finalization of fiscal year 2019 data. So the reason why we do need to finalize the 2019 data is because all of these smart forms include prior year data. We will begin releasing this information, and you should be on the lookout for that pretty soon. Next, we'll be opening up OLDC. That will become available in early March. We're doing some final testing now, and you will also receive an official opening date. And then the annual report submission. So the annual report submission can start as soon as OLDC opens, and then through April 30th for the regular CSBG annual report, and through May 30th for the supplemental reports, which we'll talk about those in future webinars. We do want to emphasize that each module can be submitted separately. So if you're still gathering information for modules 2, 3, and 4, you could still submit module 1. And if you're able to submit module 3 prior to submitting modules 2 and 4, please feel free to do so. We would request that you do not wait until April 30th, but that you start submitting as soon as you have the information available. Next, I want to talk about some training and technical assistance we have coming up. This includes webinars and presentations, as well as some upcoming communications. So here's our upcoming webinar and presentations. Tomorrow, NASCAS is doing a webinar on the CSBG annual report data review from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. You can reach out to NASCAS, and it is also available on their website. OCS Disaster Supplemental Funds Guidance, which OCS is conducting for disaster supplemental grantees only on Thursday, February 18th, also from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. On March 3rd, we will host another webinar, which we'll talk about more shortly, about the OCS CSBG Annual Report Overview. And this will go more into the details about what OCS is expecting for the CSBG Annual Report. At the NASCAS Winter Conference, OCS will be doing a federal update, as well as things to know about grants management with OGM and our OCS Town Hall. The week of March 17th, we'll do our SmartForm and OLDC refreshers for the organization, and we will announce those specific dates and times shortly. We have quite a few communications that we're working on, including a CSBG Annual Report Overview, the CSBG Annual Report Requirements, the OMB clearance about the CSBG Annual Report. This is the 30-day Federal Register Notice number 2, and you'll be able to provide comments directly to OMB during this Federal Register Notice. We'll also be going to the Federal Register Notice or CSBG State Plan, so please keep a lookout for that. We're making very minor changes, mostly small grammatical things, no major changes to the CSBG State Plan this year. And then we also have 2 DCLs coming out about monitoring, the OCS virtual monitoring and the state on-site and virtual monitoring, which Dave will speak to shortly. I want to remind you again about your contacts. We have Amy Bellman for regions 1, 2, 3, and 10, Isaac Davis for regions 7 and 8, Jamia Furbush for regions 4, 5, 6, and 9. And then for OLDC technical assistance, please reach out to myself and Nikki. New last name, but same email. You can please copy us on all technical assistance requests. This will ensure that you get a fast response. And again, as always, please copy CSBG states at acf.hhs.gov on all emails. And with that, I'm going to pass it to David Barry.
Thank you, Monique. I don't think we're going to the final thoughts at this point. I think we'll go to the next screen. I'm just here to talk to you about a dear colleague letter that currently is in review. And what our intent is to waive the on-site portion of the monitoring requirement of the CSBG Act. So you would be able to conduct either, however you term it, either virtual or remote monitoring. We believe that the Robert T. Stafford Disaster and Emergency Services Act allows us to waive that administrative portion of the CSBG Act. It's currently in review. We do expect it to be issued shortly. In that, we also include what we recommend as some minimum things to consider for your virtual or remote monitoring. Those would be conducting some form of a risk assessment. That, of course, is required by the uniform guidance for our pass-through agencies, but we just want to make sure that that you're aware of that, and we discussed a little bit with your colleague. We believe that governance, specifically the tripartite board, should be reviewed as part of your monitoring. Now, if you do this separately, that's fine with us. We would recommend that you would put that in, that you capture what you've done to assure the tripartite board compliance in your review package, or your work papers, whatever you call it. We believe eligibility being a key component of a means tested award, that testing of eligibility should be done. We believe that allowable costs, allowable activities should be examined during your monitoring. And then we believe some element of evaluating the performance reporting. Sometimes there are ways to test that while you test eligibility and kind of get 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. We also include some other considerations that you might want to consider, certainly not required, but might add to the value of your monitoring of the eligible entities. Specifically, an internal control evaluation, an evaluation of the entities, the eligible entities' financial health, and linkages. Now, we understand when you're looking at the financial health of an entity, if your entities happen to be municipal governments or county governments, that type of thing, evaluating their financial health is a little different than evaluating the health of a nonprofit. But to the extent possible, and we have some recommended things that we will include in a webinar things for you to consider, things for you to share. I know some of the states are already doing those types of things. And we also ask that you consider linkages, not just what they're reporting, but what you may be aware of that's available to them. And it doesn't have to be in a government program. It can be some other nonprofits that may have need for resources during this time. And it's a perfect time for us to look at that and see how can we best serve our communities that are in need right now. So if we go to the next slide. And we have developed a schedule for our monitoring of states. We're doing our monitoring virtually, remote monitoring. So for those selected, we hope to get engagement letters out soon. That's currently in our management review. Just to give states an idea of what we are looking at. We've conducted 2 already. I think it was back in December. And we're taking some of the things that we had learned, what worked, what didn't, and trying to streamline it as much as possible. We understand the need in the communities and the difficulty of responding to monitoring for our agencies as well as our states. And so we're trying to do it in a way that creates the least amount of negative impact on you as possible. We do look to see how is the state evaluating the tripartite board compliance. We do take samples of the TNTA provided to community action agencies. How was that determined, what was needed, those types of things. We look to see how is your monitoring of their fiscal and their governance. By fiscal, we're talking about how are the costs associated with the award, how are you evaluating that. In monitoring of the program, we take a look to see what kind of oversight you have over the program, how they're meeting their org standards, how they're managing any kind of requirements that you may have. And then included in that, we have a look at performance reporting. What we specifically do would be to look at how are you evaluating the eligible entities and their performance reporting. In our reviews of states, we take a look at some general ledger transactions for essentially the 5% for administration and the remainder. We look to see how you decide to spend it, how do you account for it, and how do you, what the process is for getting the funds out, and that we're accounting for funds in the correct period and tying it to the correct award. We do a small amount of allowability of cost to see that these things are related to the CSBG program and that they don't that they don't violate any state rules on what's allowable or not. It's not, we don't call it an audit because we don't do enough of a sample to call it an audit, but we do design our reviews in accordance with the generally accepted government auditing standards. That's essentially our model for how we review things. And the other things the other thing that we would look at would be reporting. The FFR for the standard form 425, your CSBG annual report, those types of things. And within there, we have looked at things like the single audit submitted to you by the eligible entities. Are any management decisions made? Are you using that data? Those types of things. That's in general what we do. Now, if we become aware of something that we're asked to look at as part of that, we would add that to our standard review. But this just kind of gives you a general idea of what we look at. So, and we hope to have the schedule published, and we'll select for the remainder of this year, and also for the first 2 or 3 for the fiscal year 22, which we'll have. So we'll have be able to start 22 off, and people will know if we're coming or not. I think we're ready to go to the next slide. I hope it didn't go too quickly. I had promised to go nice and slow, so I'll hand it back to, I think Monique is taking this part. Or not?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I have to unmute and do all that. Just a reminder for everyone, if you could please ask the questions within the Q&A pod, not in the chat pod. That would help us tremendously. We really appreciate it. The Q&A pod can be found, I believe on your view, it's at the bottom of the screen, and you can just click Q&A and then you'll ask your question, and then we'll answer it either through the pod or live. So I'll be asking questions, and then my comrades will respond. So thank you guys again for attending, and we'll begin the Q&A portion. I am going to start with what was in the chat box, but if future questions could go in the Q&A, we'd really appreciate it. So the first question is, I presume that the dropdown will allow you to select multiple funding sources, for example, both CARES and standard CSPG. I believe this is in reference to the revision made to Module 3, and the answer to that is yes, you will be able to select multiple ones. It's actually checkboxes, so you can select that you use CARES, CSPG, or disaster, or disaster. The next question is, do agencies include CSPG care expenditures in Modules 2, Section A of the regular annual report? Do agencies include CSPG cares allocated in Module 2, Section C, line C.2?
Who, are you directing that at me?
Well, Maxine or Sharice or you, but
okay.
As well.
My understanding was it was in a separate part in the CARES report. But
so there is a separate part in the CARES report, but yes, you are going to also, so your regular CSPG report should include all of your funding, including CARES and disaster. And then the supplemental reports will be of the above, how much was used towards CARES and how much was used towards disaster. So the short answer to that is yes. The next question is, oh, we're asking that question again. When will XML forms be available for states with statewide databases? So that smart forms, so the XML schema has not changed for states with state databases. They are, that schema is staying the same. So for states who have state databases, you shouldn't expect any changes. For the so that information has been released. We're not really expecting to release new information. I'm not sure if that answers the question. We have our next question. This will be for you, David Berry. If agencies have not expended funds for CARES in 2020, do they still need to report? If so, how and what will it look like?
Well, if they wouldn't have anything to report. So I don't know that I understand the question. If there's nothing to report, I don't believe we're asking for a report, unless we're going to ask for a report that says 0, and we haven't discussed that possibility.
And if it's a situation where, if I'm not mistaken, CARES Act funding has not been utilized yet, we would like to reach out to the states to talk about ways, if this is this specific to CARES Act funding, Monique?
Yes, they're specifically asking for CARES. If they have not expended CARES in 2020, do they still need to report? If so, how would that look?
Well, there wouldn't be anything to report to David's point, but I would like to follow up by saying, if states have not expended funds, did not expend funds in 2020, we're just asking them to quickly start to work with their eligible entities to spend the CARES Act funding as soon as possible to meet the needs on a local level. So I understand if they weren't able to because of a variety of reasons, but if we can help in any way to expedite future spending, then we're here to provide technical assistance and support to do that in regards to CARES funding based on the CARES Act legislation, which wanted to get money to communities as soon as possible to relieve some of the impact of COVID-19.
Okay. The next question, are there any changes to the needs assessment requirement timeframe? We have heard from the agencies that some components are a bit hard to complete due to the pandemic.
Where we do believe it may be more difficult to do updates to the community assessment, we also believe that conditions have changed in communities on a local level and also at a state level. So we ask that do your due diligence to update these reports and make them relevant, so that as you make prepare to do state plans and things of that type, you have the most current information available to support your decision making. So we do understand it may be more difficult. We just ask you just to do your best to update the community's assessments as appropriate.
For David, will there be information on how states can monitor for client eligibility considering a virtual format? Specifically, the requirement/ability to protect the private/personal information of clients. In a virtual format, that is extremely challenging in instances where we do not have a secure file transfer system in place, and CAAs have client files on their network server.
We're going to discuss that at a webinar. There, we don't have any set rules on that. There are some alternatives that we can talk through in terms of using work of others, other external auditors or other state agencies that are monitoring the same entity. If there's any other federal monitoring going on, we may be able to leverage some of the work that's done by others to get to that comfort that it's being done. We struggle with the same type of challenge, is that when we're doing our monitoring, we want to make sure we don't get anything that has personally identifiable information. Because our systems are, we're not really set up for that type of thing. We can do it, but it becomes an administrative challenge for us to make sure we're in compliance with those rules. So, it doesn't really add any assurance to us. So we try to not collect that data. But I understand that in the virtual environment, looking at things online and getting copies of it can be a little challenging when you're trying to protect that information. There are things that you can do in sharing screens on Zooms, we use WebEx more often than Zoom, that we can walk through things and somebody can present something that's on their screen and we're not keeping an active record of that. And that's typically how we've done this. But this is going to be something that we'll all have to work through together. I don't know if that's a great answer, but that's all I've got at the moment.
Thank you, David. So we do have a question about the OMB clearance. The module 4A that was presented for CARES did not allow for outcomes to report it. The latest information seems to indicate that the CARES would be included in the regular annual report and then split for its own report. Has that changed? And then when I asked about outcomes in module 4A, I'm addressing specifically the achieving column, which was great in the report that went out. So that is part of the OMB clearance. We did put out the first 60-day Federal Register notice for the OMB clearance, and our initial suggestion was that for module 4, section A, we would only request information about the individual served. We have been working, we have received comments from the original OMB clearance, and we've also been working with the data task force and receiving comments from them, and they have expressed to us some concerns about the separate reporting. So for this year, we are only collecting module B of section B of module 4. That will be part of this second OMB clearance, but we may request additional reporting in future years. So for 2021, we may go back to requesting Section A and Section C as well. But for 2020, we are only requesting Section B. That has changed, and that will be included in the next Federal Register notice. David, there's another question about when should we expect the federal monitoring schedule release?
We submitted it probably a week and a half ago, so I believe it should be approved in the next. I would have thought that it would have been approved in the last week, but I think there's a tremendous amount of documents going through right now with the transition and everything. So I believe that we can get it approved and posted by next week, but I can't guarantee it.
Okay.
David, thank you. We will do everything to have this document ready and disseminated by the end of the month. So you should be hearing something really soon. And to David's point, it is in the final review process.
This recording and the slides will be emailed as soon as possible. We do have to go through some 508 compliance and make sure that we're able to disseminate. So we will work as quickly as possible to disseminate the recording and the slides as well. So we do have a comment. When you are on the state fiscal year, July through June, you're reporting a year behind. So for Module 1, you are expected to report based on the federal fiscal year. So that is October 1st through September 30th. David, did you have any additional comments about reporting on the state fiscal year, or Maxine or Sharice?
Not really. And that it generally means that you have an additional 3 months to gather the data. So I don't want to encourage it or discourage it. So I don't think it would cause any issues other than having the challenge with having to do Module 1 in the federal fiscal year.
Okay, thank you, David. We have a question about the OMB clearance and when the data will be finalized. So actually, we did receive clearance for the supplemental reports that you guys received as part of our clearance in December. So technically, that is expected to be the final report. We made some small changes based on comments and feedback we received, which we expect to release early this week or late next week. And you'll be able to update your systems based on that information, minor any additional major revisions requested during these 30-day Federal Register notice. But we do expect the final report that you receive in the next week or so to be the final. And so you can begin updating your services. I'm sorry, updating your systems. We have another question. Can states use their own database for reporting instead of the smart forms? Yes, states are able to use their own database for reporting instead of the smart forms, but you will have to configure your database to convert to XMLs in order to submit that information through OLDC. I encourage you to reach out to NASCAS about information on that if your database is not already prepared to do the XML release. We received a question. Can you please clarify instructions for CARES Act reporting in Module 3? The slide indicated that there would be no separate form and a dropdown would be added to the existing form to identify CARES supplemental funding. Does this mean that regular CARES CSVG annual report will have a dropdown? Yes, there will be a dropdown for the regular CSVG for CARES funding as well as disaster supplemental funding. So there will be a dropdown for all three. This is the one change that we made to the Module 3 form. We received a clarifying question. If the agency did not expend CARES funds in fiscal year 20, they would not need to submit the CSBG CARES annual report. However, they would report zero expended, zero served. I think our response to that is that we are going to double back. We're going to double check on that. And we haven't discussed it thoroughly internally. But Sharice or David, did you guys want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I think they're asking, would this agency that spent zero in 2020, would they be required to report? And in terms of how we read that. And I think your answer is strong. We need to consider whether we're going to have them report zero activity, $0, or are we going to just waive that portion of the reporting? And I don't know that we have an answer yet. Actually, I don't know that we've ever discussed it.
Well, you know, David, the interesting thing is, I think when Maxine closes it out, she'll talk a little bit about how we're going to use these questions for future webinars. So all of these questions are great questions.
Well, thanks, Sharice. That means you've passed the baton to me. Can we take it to the next slide, please? Well, as Sharice mentioned, we are going to take questions that are in the question and chat box today and formulate our next presentation based on those questions and those questions you've asked. We'll also, some of the questions may have been state individually asked questions, and what I will do will be double back to the state who asked a specific question to make sure that we have those answers. These have been really some great questions, and it helps us design our future webinars and training and technical assistance efforts for the states. So as we're getting close to closing, I want to talk about what's next. Well, what's next is we're going to have a March 3rd webinar. And this webinar, we're going to talk into detail about the annual reporting. It'll be what to expect when you're completing your reporting. I know many of you are in the process of formulating those reports, and we hope that this information we provide you supplements your efforts. We'll be talking about in details module 1 through 4, providing you some information on each individual section and what we are expecting to receive from you, so that you have a clear expectation of what you're submitting, and it'll help minimize the back and forth. I know there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of interest with regards to modules 2 through 4. So we will ensure that as we're planning this next webinar, that we hone in on providing you as much clarity, some tips and tricks about modules 2 through 4, so that the submission is seamless. It reduces the burden, and there's a lot of clarity on what's expected, as well as our goal is to address some of the technical issues that we've experienced over the past couple of years. We want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible. We know you have a lot going on at the state level, and submitting these reports back to back can be a lot. So we will do our best to ensure that we provide you as much information in advance and have our systems up and ready so that you have seamless and easy submissions of those reports. In closing, we want to express our gratitude to you for spending this time today. As you see, with each new webinar, we're adding more content to provide you clarity, to provide you succinct information, as well as up-to-date information. You know, when we think about our relationship from federal to state, state to federal, these two relationships are most important to the success of the network. And so together, when we come together and we are having those, difficult conversations, we're sharing information, we are timely with our communication and clear with our communication, then together we impact the success of the network. And, you know, it's all about coordination. It's all about collaboration, but remembering the state to federal, federal to state relationship is so important. And so we thank you for your work. We appreciate what you do on the ground level. We hope you all stay well, you all stay healthy. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if you need us. As a reminder, anytime you email either myself, Sharice, David, or your assigned program specialists, please ensure to include CSBG State. That ensures that you have an immediate response. And we also use it to kind of track what are the typical questions that we're getting. This helps us, again, provide you that targeted support and ensures that we're in alignment with your needs. So in closing, again, thank you. Be well, be safe, and have a wonderful day.